everybody, today we're reviewing Miraculous Tales of Ladybug and Cat Noir. That is a long name, and the episode is Stormy Weather, the first episode. The interesting thing about this first episode is that they don't really introduce things, they just jump right in. What do you think of shows that do that?
I don't like it. I really don't. I hate shows that I've never there's a lot of shows that do this, and yes, I don't like it in this. I don't like it in Code Lyoko. I don't even like it in the second anime series of Yu-Gi-Oh! Either. A lot of shows just start off with no explanation, and there's so many answers left unsaid.
Yeah, and I'll admit, if I hadn't watched the prequel first, I'm thinking some things just haven't been explained. Like, was it understandable for you because you haven't seen the prequel?
It's understandable because I know it's a kid's show, but the problem is, here's the thing, I try to put myself in a different mind. I said to myself, would I have watched this if it was on when I was a kid? I probably wouldn't. The animation is just terrible. It's the worst 3D animation I've ever seen.
Originally they were going to go for an anime style, but apparently that was more expensive. So they changed to this.
When is this show made?
I forgot.
Oh, for God's sake.
But anyway, because...
It's clearly more recently made, and yet Code Lyoko has better CG animation than this.
Yeah, it's fairly recent because it's still going.
Exactly. Code Lyoko's got better 3D animation than this.
Yeah,
This
true.
is just weird, skinny ragdoll animation. People on the internet make better animation than this.
Yeah, I'll agree to that. But because they didn't introduce things, does this affect your ability to root for our heroes because you don't know how they became who they are and how they got their powers?
Not really, I just don't care for the heroes. There's nothing of interest. The weird thing is, I don't know their age, but I'm guessing they're like, I don't know, 17 or 18 or something. And
Actually, more like 15.
Even still, they act more childish. The weird thing is, this show just feels way more childish than Code Lyoko, even though Code Lyoko has younger characters, and yet the characters in Code Lyoko actually act a lot closer to their real age. I'm going to make a lot of comparisons because they're both French CG shows, so why not?
I'll admit, yes, especially Marinette is very childish at times, but I think maybe that's because they're leaving room for her to mature later on. I'm not sure. And as for Adrian, you don't know this yet, but he was homeschooled most of his life and neglected by his parents, which was why he hasn't had a chance to really mature in terms of forming relationships with other people. So that is why he struggles with some things. But what do you think of our heroes, Ladybug and Cat Noir?
I really don't care. Like I said, they just act childish. And the weird thing is...
Well, they do get smarter.
The weird thing is, okay, as a kid, I would have assumed this is just a female show. Which is ironic because I've watched a lot of shows as a kid which clearly were targeted at females, but they were a lot more gender neutral. I watched Winx Club as a kid. I watched Totally Spies as a kid. Both of them had elements mixing in feminine stuff with hero stuff, and I enjoyed them more than I enjoyed this.
True. Like, Ladybug and Cat Noir are both main characters, but if you had to pick one, I'd say Marinette is more the main character.
Considering the show is named after her, essentially.
Well, it's got Ladybug and Cat Noir in the name.
No, it doesn't. What's the show called?
Miraculous Tales of Ladybug and Cat Noir.
How come I've never heard the second half of that name?
Because people shorten it to Miraculous Ladybug because it's such a long name.
Exactly.
Okay. Moving on to getting specific about this episode, what did you think of our villain of the episode, Stormy Weather?
She just comes off as annoying. And the weird thing is, this goes back to the animation. When she put on her costume, the first thing I think of is she just feels like a rejected member of Team Flare from Pokemon. The animation, the CG just looks a lot like it. For some reason, Pokemon X and Y does this weird thing where the battles have 3D characters.
Well,
and for
the
some
reason why she acts so annoying, for lack of a better word, especially while she's transformed, is because Hawkmoth preys on their negative emotions and amplifies them to make people want to help him, essentially. Hawkmoth basically says, I'll give you powers to do what you want with. In return, you have to get me Ladybug and Cat Noir's Miraculous, which is what gives them their powers.
Yeah, why did maybe it's just because I just recently watched season 4 of Yu-Gi-Oh, but I just feel like I'm watching a rip-off of season 4. It's exactly like the Seal of Orichalcos. I will give you the Orichalcos power. You give me the souls of the Pharaoh and Joey. It's exactly like that. It preys on their anger and negative emotions. He's using them for their own deal. They become evil, and then they want to get her or him or do whatever. I wasn't paying attention.
Yeah,
It's just the same thing. Except not as interesting, because I don't care about these characters. At least when they did it in season 4, by then I care a bit about the characters.
Well, it's interesting once you find out, like, why Hawkmoth wants the Miraculouses and how powerful they really are. It does get better once we learn more about their past and what really motivates them to do what they're doing.
Except the problem is, if you're going to have a show that hinges on needing to know somebody's past and that being the fun part, you need to make it actually a mystery. There's nothing mysterious about their past, we just don't know it. Other shows where a character's past is mysterious, it's because we and both us and the show doesn't know it, so it feels like a mystery we're always trying to learn. Whether it's Aileda's past or the Pharaoh's past in Yu-Gi-Oh!
Well, that
both
does
times.
happen, just not in the first episode. Pretty soon, we see Adrian's mother lying dead in a coffin, and we have the mystery of, well, what happened to her? They don't really discuss what happened to her.
Yeah, but is that a mystery to us, or is that a mystery in the show?
Both. For a while, we don't know how she got into that comatose state. Like, she's not even completely dead. I think Adrian believes she's dead, but only his father knows what really happened to her.
I've really got to check the year of when this was made and its rating. Because this is like...
It's still going, and they're currently working on season 4.
This definitely... That's the thing, this feels way more G-rated. Whereas at least other younger shows, I feel other younger shows are able to be more interesting and more dark.
Oh, it gets dark in, like, season 3. There are a few moments, like, those of you who have seen Cat Blanc, you know what I'm on about.
Well, nobody likes to have a show where we say it gets better, even though I say that about every show.
Well, yeah, whenever you watch a show with someone, you feel the need to tell them, this is just season 1, even I know it sucks. Like, season 1s always suck in comparison to the rest of a show.
Not necessarily. Most Flash fans will agree season 1 was the best.
Yeah, but like, you're always comparing it to Code Lyoko, which we've always said, it's boring. Xana attacks, they deactivate the tower, the end. And that's kind of similar to this season 1 in terms of, it's just Hawkmoth akumatizes someone and they beat them. And we don't get a lot of, like, ongoing story in season 1. It's not until season 2 when we learn about other stuff and we see other Miraculouses and we learn why Hawkmoth wants them.
Well, that's the thing though. There's nothing wrong with having a season 1 where it's mostly filler. A lot of shows do that. I'm okay with filler, especially early on, because it's a justification to give us character development and let us enjoy the characters. But there were no good character moments. Every good character moment in this episode was boring. At least with Code Lyoko, even in the first couple of episodes as a kid, I was intrigued by it. I wanted to see more of the show. I wanted to see more of the world, because I was confused. Because, well, I didn't realise there was a prequel. Actually, I don't think the prequel's out, but even so, I wanted to know more. I don't want to know more about this. Whoop-de-doo, they've got powers. Who cares?
You don't know how they got their powers.
So?
Or why they need them.
There are a lot of superheroes who don't show you...
Or what about Hawkmoth? Why does he have his powers?
I don't know, he just comes across as generic villain.
He's actually not. His motivations are actually very interesting. In fact, from that first episode, I don't think it was clear who he is.
Exactly, which makes him just come across as generic villain who wants the heroes all their powers or both. Honestly, it's like watching a Saturday morning cartoon with the Smurfs. I'll get you! And it's just every episode it feels like that. Even if the next episode's different, the first episode
I never
just
thought
gives...
of it like that. And
The
yes,
first episode
I
gives off
agree.
the wrong
This
impressions.
is not a good way to start it. And I know I keep saying this, but it does get so good. And I'll admit, they did not start this off well, but he does have great motivations. You see, if you get both the Ladybug and Cat Miraculous and put them together, you get to basically make any wish, but the problem is that wish comes with a sacrifice. So for example, if you wish someone back from the dead, someone has to die. And that's sort of the mystery fans tend to discuss recently, is that if Hawkmoth did succeed and make that wish, who would get sacrificed? Because I know exactly what he wants to do with that wish, and it's an understandable wish to make, and I'm still really interested to see how it pans out. And if the heroes find out who he is, I'm sure they would understand as well. Like, do you think there was any indication yet of who Hawkmoth was?
No, which is the problem.
True. But then again, if you had seen the prequel first, I think it would have been indicated.
That's the thing. If you're going to have something be a blank, have it be actively a blank to the heroes. But the heroes don't even acknowledge it, so to us, it's just a boring villain who has nothing.
Well, yeah, at this point, they're not really thinking about trying to figure out who Hawkmoth is, because they have no clues whatsoever. But later on, they start to think, well, who do we know who hasn't been akumatized and fits a bunch of criteria? And then what he does is he akumatizes himself, because he knows they're getting suspicious. And then they rule him out. They're like, oh no, it couldn't be him, because he got akumatized. So they really don't understand the full extent of his powers, and I think that's what scares them the most.
Yeah, but the thing is, this episode gives no indication of any future plot lines. Even with other shows, you can see hints of other plot lines coming in the future. You watch Code Lyoko, the first episode, you can already figure out, okay, this is what the show is. You can't figure that out. It's just, okay, here's a typical female show, here's some weird thing happening, a villain does something, the end.
True. Like, I keep saying, I agree, they did not start it off well.
Exactly, you haven't actually... That's the problem. You haven't actually listed any positive things about this episode. You keep trying to get me back on track to this episode, but it doesn't work. Because there is nothing positive about this episode. It's not a matter of if the future's better. We're not up to the future.
Yeah. Like I said, I agree. This episode, compared to the rest of the show, not so good. I wish they had found a better way to start off. Like, I would have preferred it if they had just made the prequels first and just shown it first. But they didn't end up doing it until the end of season 1. And that's when they decided to say, well, let's explain how they got their powers. And that prequel does leave a bit of a mystery as to a character that we finally see in the prequel. Okay, but as a whole, did you come up with a rating for this episode?
I'm tossing between a 3 and a 4. It's definitely below average. It's boring. It's worse than boring. It's annoying. It comes across as a kid's show I would just want to change the channel on, whether I was a kid or an adult.
Yeah, and when it comes to re-watching for me, this is never one of the ones that I think of. Like, if I'm not watching in order, I just think, oh, I feel like watching an episode of Ladybug. This never pops into my head. So for that, I suppose I'd have to go for a 4.
Well, I suppose we'll see if the next episode's any better, but I have no hope for now.
I think it is a little better, to the point where when they showed the show in America, they put episode 2 first instead. They thought, the Americans seemed to think episode 2 introduces things a little better than episode 1. I don't think it introduces things per se, but I don't know why they chose it, but for some reason they swapped episode 1 and 2 when showing it in America. So
That's another thing I hate. There are several shows I know that, whether through fault of their own or not, they've flipped an episode, which on one hand means that, hey, they were able to fix the situation. On another hand, means that the episodes lack so little continuity that they could just flip them willy-nilly and you barely notice.
yeah, true, and I'll admit, in season 1, there is not much continuity. Nothing really carries over until later on, when some things end up happening that characters need to remember later on to... Otherwise it wouldn't make sense when something happens unless that thing has already happened.
Well, we'll see about next episode next time.